after.
Midnight.
Alright, so this is a video that I have been meaning to make for a while. It's to right some wrongs. So when we first started recording the podcast, first episode, we're just excited. I really, for some reason, wanted to find a way to bring up Noah Kahan because I had just discovered him at the time. Maybe a little before, but I had been listening to him every day. Absolutely love him as an artist. Probably one of my favorites right now. So I was super excited to bring him up and talk about him. The problem is, as with many things in my life, I tend to do more talking than thinking.
You must think I'm pretty dumb, huh? Yes!
And so in that episode, I had said that Noah Kahan, I thought Stick Season was his first album, and that he I hate even saying it, that he was discovered on TikTok.
I like the nail shop, I like candy, I like clothes, but I love TikTok, I like candy.
And so that's ridiculous, okay, because he's got multiple albums. I let my excitement get the best of me. But this video is gonna be Stick Season, the deluxe version of the album. This is gonna be kind of about that album and what my personal favorite songs off of that album are and what I happen to interpret those songs as, because he's a very poetic songwriter. Not overly complicated or anything. He's just really, really good at metaphors, and everything has a meaning in a way. Noah Kahan is a singer-songwriter.
Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Really making a name for himself right now. I don't think he was necessarily hurting before, but he's definitely taking over at least America by storm. He's got fans everywhere now, as he should. Big fan of Noah Kahan, not even just for his music, but his fan engagement's pretty cool. He's constantly reposting other songwriters and singers doing covers of his music on TikTok, and I think that's awesome. And then I don't think he's on the whole tour. He might be. Brista Maroney out of Knoxville, Tennessee is actually playing some shows with him, which is super cool. Brista Maroney is another excellent singer-songwriter. So anyway, this is going to be the Stick Season album. So yeah, this is my list of I think it's 10 songs I have on here, and kind of how I interpret them. Not that I'm any sort of expert or anything, because I'm sure you know if you've watched any of these.
Man has struggled with it for centuries, but every day science comes closer to untangling this problem.
So first up on the list is All My Love. Absolute great song. I mean, it seems to be a very supportive breakup song, kind of even though we're over, we still have all these wonderful memories together, and I'm sure at least people who, a breakup's never necessarily a great thing for a lot of people, but, I'm sure everybody kind of has that breakup where it's very yeah, we love each other, but we don't seem to be super compatible. It typically happens a lot with young love and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, just a great song. Just a great song of him kind of saying, hey, you got all my love still, even if we are just friends, and I'm glad that we share this experience together. So yeah, great song. Second on the list is Come Over. This one it definitely showcases his ability to have some really cool metaphors, really showcases his songwriting ability, and his vocal range. I mean, he's a wonderful singer as well. So Come Over, he said himself, is essentially about being ashamed of where you live. Maybe, it's in a poorer community, but it's, not necessarily being proud of the house that you grew up in, but at the same time, especially through middle school, high school, it's very normal to have friends over, and so, he does that anyway, but it's still kind of weighs heavy on him, that like he feels a little less than. You know, it opens up with, I'm in the business of losing your interest and I turn a profit each time that I speak. I think that is such a killer line. I absolutely love that line. And then, you know, when he's talking about being ashamed of where he grew up, he says, my house was designed to kind of look like it's crying. The eyes are the windows, the garage is the mouth. And he's saying, if you're looking for the sad kid in the sad house, you know, that's him. Just really awesome. A lot of lines in there, you know. I'm a real big fan of, in the second verse, he says, my mouth was designed for my foot to fit in it. Dude, that's a great line. That's a great line. Alright, so next up, Orange Juice. I have heard other people's interpretations of this song, and I've heard a lot of people say that it's, you know, he might have said this himself, I have no idea, but a lot of people seem to think that it is about essentially two people that are now sober. And, you know, like Noah got sober, and then either a family member or a friend got sober, and he's saying, hey, you know, you can come over to my house, we don't even have to talk about it, there won't be any temptations. When I first listened to it, and still kind of now, because it's, you know, it was my first impression of it, it's kind of hard to shake that. I personally perceived that song as about Noah himself struggling with the addiction to alcohol and, you know, finally kicking it. He says in the song that he's 6 months sober on the dot. And I always kind of perceived it as he comes to a family member's gathering, whether it's his mother or his grandmother, and they're trying to be supportive, and they have the best intentions, but there's always kind of that undertone, and so they say, you know, like, not undertone as in like they're purposely doing it by any means, but it has a line where he says, there's orange juice in the kitchen, bought for the children. I don't know, when I first heard it, I didn't think it was like anybody like sending a shot, like even purposely, but it's just kind of like, you know, I've struggled with drinking in the past and whatnot, and it just almost kind of feels like, I think it's just that small line of bought for the children. It's just like, you know, it's not an adult drink. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways to perceive it. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how I always took it. Strawberry Wine. Absolutely love this song. I think it's very heartbreaking, very beautifully written. It is about young love that is just passion, you know? Like young love. Like it's innocent. You feel how strong the love part is, and if you've ever had to go through the breakup part, it's just as strong, right? It's like that strong, fiery, burning love, Romeo and Juliet type shit. But when that ends, it hurts just as bad as it felt good. You know what I mean? It's awful. So I really, that song just seems to be about young love, that, you know, they end up being incompatible, and they got to go their separate ways, and it's kind of showcased a little bit when he says, and easily one of my favorite lines through any of the songs on the album, but he has a part where he says, if I were empty space and you were a formless shape, we would fit. And I think that's pretty powerful, right? I mean, that's beautifully written. I think there's a lot of weight to meaning like that. And, you know, no matter how bad you want it to work, sometimes it just doesn't. I think it's a very beautiful song. It's absolutely a killer. Next up, which is a perfect one to follow that one up, it's a song called Still. Still is definitely about when a relationship ends, and he seems to be torn between knowing that he needs to let go, but at the same time, it's almost like he's got you know, a person on each shoulder, and one of them saying like, hey, you know, it's best to just call it quits and start the healing process. But then the other part of him is like, I don't want to do that. I'm fighting that. And there's, you know, it's kind of like his metaphor in that is a line where he says something about like, can't tell if you want a place on the coast or the country. You know, you're being pulled in two different directions, and, you know, do you leave? Do you stay? Do you keep fighting? And, you know, it's like, am I still here with you? I don't want to say goodbye. I mean, it's just, it's a great song. Alright, so next up on the list is Your Needs, My Needs. Awesome song. It's a lot harder to nail down exactly what it means. The whole song in itself is written very poetically, and not in like a bad way. It's not like over the top, but it's definitely, there's not one like real straightforward part of the whole song that just goes, hey, this is what it's about. It's very kind of, I don't know, I guess interpret it yourself. I mean, the closest giveaway there is the title of it, which is Your Needs, My Needs. And again, like many of his songs, I think it kind of has to do with separating, but you know, putting both of your needs first, and maybe those don't line up. It's mainly on the list just because I think it's a very beautifully written song. You know, he has a part where he's like talking about how the other person is a work of art, and that's the hardest part because, you know, someone can be great. Like, you know, separating doesn't always mean that it's somebody's fault. And I know that that's like, especially when you're in this situation, it's really hard to see that. But I mean, sometimes the cliche is true, and it's not you, it's me, or sometimes it's true, man. Like, sometimes things just don't work out, dude. That's real life. Next up, Dial Drunk. Absolutely love this song. So, Noah Kahan has been kind of coined Folk Malone, which is hilarious in and of itself. I mean, like, kind of has that, you know, he's got a great vocal range, and so does Post Malone. So, I guess Post Malone, you know, knew about this and thought it would be funny, but they got a feature on it, right? So Dial Drunk came out, and then Post Malone got a feature on that song after it came out. They just released a second version of it, I want to say on like July 17th, I think is when it came out. Great song though. I mean, Dial Drunk, I mean, like, listen, every one of Noah Kahan's songs seems to be heartbreaking. That's just how it is, you know. That's why everybody says if you're a big Noah Kahan fan, you should probably go to therapy, and they're probably not wrong. I mean, he's tear you apart. But Dial Drunk is essentially about two people who are broken up. Maybe all these songs are about the same person. You know what? Putting the pieces together. But yeah, I mean, it's just like Dial Drunk. Like, he knows it's over. Like, it's very apparent that the relationship's over for whatever reason. And I think sober he can accept that. But then, you know, when he starts drinking, he becomes very selfish, and regardless of how she feels about it, he still reaches out and tries to talk to her. You know, he's got a line where he says, he's talking about drinking, and he calls it his medicine, and he says, my medicine is drowning your perspective out. I take that as like, listen, I know you need your space, but I find it way too hard to give you space right now in this moment because I'm inebriated. And it's very clear throughout the song that she is done with him. She's, you know, like, whether she wants to be or not, she's kind of accepted the fact that they're over because he gets arrested in the song, and he's talking about how, you know, she is his emergency phone call. And so they call her because, you know, he's getting arrested. They're like, listen, you got anybody that can take you or whatever, anybody who wants you? And he's, you know, let me call her. And she hangs up. And so it's very, like, he's got a part where he says, you know, even the cops thought you were wrong for hanging up. I'll dial drunk, I'll die a drunk, I'd die for you. He very obviously loves the woman. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, especially if we're going to assume that this is during his alcoholic stage in life. I mean, it's a hard thing to deal with, even if you're not like a bad person, and even if you're not like a violent drunk or anything. I mean, being around someone who drinks way too much can be difficult to handle, and you know, I think maybe she's just accepted that and moved on. You know, it doesn't work out, and he's just begging, like, you know, at a certain point he's like, you know, talking about how, you know, please just let me call, I swear she'll, I can't remember all the words, but yeah, listen, it's just, you just listen to it, you know, figure it out yourself. No Complaints, I think that's a really awesome song. So No Complaints essentially seems to be, and maybe even it's about him specifically, but it seems to be about a person who on paper has everything that they could want, yet they still struggle with mental illness, whether it's depression or anxiety, and, you know, just trying to kind of fake it, just faking your own happiness in hopes that nobody can really tell. he doesn't want to complain about it, because what is there to complain about? You live in your absolute dreams, and you're young, and like, what's there to be sad about? That's the huge misconception of depression right there. It's like, what do you have to be sad about? Listen, buddy, I know I have nothing to be sad about, and that kind of rubs it in too, you know what I mean? Like, that sucks even more. I don't have anything to be sad about, yet I'm still depressed. What the hell is that about, But yeah, no, I mean, I personally, most songwriters write songs that they can at least relate to. And so it seems like it's kind of him still struggling with his mental illness and, kind of trying to fake it until you make it, because he's trying to make so many people happy at one time. But it's not always easy, It's not always easy. It's my giant note sheet that I wrote before all this, because there's just way too much going on. Next on the list is Call Your Mom. Probably the heaviest hitting song on the entire album. It's about doing everything you possibly can to be there for someone who doesn't want to be there for themselves, or doesn't want to be living anymore. And it's essentially, the entire song is just like, listen, I understand entirely where you're coming from. I've been there myself. He's got a line where he says, all lights that have been turned off can be turned back on. And, it's just, the whole second verse is essentially him pleading with this person. I think it's the second verse, where he's like pleading with them. Like, he says, meditate, swear your soul to Jesus. And then, the next part he's talking about, throw a punch, fall in love, anything to find a reason. And it's just like all these Hail Marys, you know what I mean? Like, there's gotta be something that can help. And, he's talking about how he doesn't want to drive another mile without knowing that they're still breathing. I mean, it's a very hard-hitting song. I mean, especially for anybody who's ever lost somebody that was, self-inflicted, or if they felt that way themselves. I mean, it's definitely a powerful song. There's a lot going on. It's really good. It's really heavy, though. So, definitely not a party song. But, great song nonetheless. Last on the list, You're Gonna Go So Far. The whole song is essentially about, loving someone who is leaving because, maybe they have a greater opportunity somewhere else, or, they made it out. They made it out of that town that everybody wants to make it out of, and they made it out. And, everybody's super supportive and happy for them, and no matter how much it hurts, that doesn't mean that it's not for the better, whether you see that at first or not, or whether you know it but you don't want to know it. It's beautiful. I mean, there's a part where he's like, talking about how happy that they're gonna be gone, because while they clean shit up in the yard and everything is still the exact same there, they'll at least know that they're doing something better with their life. It talks about who the hell wants to live just to survive. And I mean, listen, a lot of people can relate to that. You know what I mean? Especially in the day and age we live in now, with how expensive everything is, and you kind of fall in that cycle of you're just working to live and you're living to work, and you're just, everything's so expensive and you're paying bills, and it starts to become mundane, right? It starts to feel like there's nothing else. There's nothing else. You're just born to work, pay taxes, and then you die. And a lot of people get caught in that cycle, and it's a hard one to get out of. And it's, it's kind of what the song's about, man. Just who wants to live if all you're doing is surviving? That's kind of depressing in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, been wanting to make this video for a long time. Glad that I didn't, because the deluxe album is relatively new still, a couple months old, if that. I think it's honestly maybe 2 months old at this point, but yeah, great album. I mean, it's different than his other music, in my opinion. I think this one sounds a lot more established, and a lot not like the other ones didn't sound good. Like, the production value was still great, the songwriting's still great, but this one seems to maintain a very linear sound. It's very folk. It's very kind of like, I don't know if indie alternative is the right way, but it's like very folk. It's like new age folk. It's really good. It's really good. So glad I finally got around to it, man. Hopefully I will get to see him sometime soon. right? Killer artist. All right, this has been Just After Midnight.